National Guard deployment has been a controversial hallmark of the Trump administration throughout 2025, becoming one of the most debated symbols of how the government chose to address law and order in America's largest urban centers. U.S. President Donald Trump announced that his administration is now removing National Guard troops from U.S. cities, signaling what he cast as a successful completion of their mission and a transition back to normal policing and local control. The withdrawal, he specified, will take place in key metro areas including Los Angeles, Chicago, and Portland, cities that have been repeatedly highlighted in his speeches and posts as focal points of the crime and disorder debate. This decision comes after months of deployment in several major cities to address crime and disorder, during which the presence of uniformed guard units on city streets sparked both praise from supporters and intense criticism from civil liberties advocates. In a social media post, Trump said that the presence of the National Guard had greatly reduced crime in those cities, arguing that visible military support for local law enforcement created a powerful deterrent against offenders and repeat violence. He emphasized that the troops' contribution had been vital to restoring stability and confidence, and he publicly credited them as great patriots who had stepped in when, in his view, local leaders were failing to keep residents safe. Despite the withdrawals, Trump warned that these forces could return if crime rates begin to rise again, making clear that he is prepared to redeploy guard units quickly should he deem local conditions to be deteriorating or uncontrolled. The National Guard is typically deployed for domestic emergencies, including natural disasters and large-scale crises, so its extended use for routine urban crime control has raised persistent questions about precedent and the proper limits of federal power. Trump deployed the troops to several Democrat-led cities in 2025, citing his concerns over crime and arguing that local Democratic officials were either unwilling or unable to act decisively enough to protect their own communities. The National Guard steps in to support local police during major protests or civil unrest, adding extra manpower to keep streets and communities secure. He also responds to natural disasters, moving quickly into hard-hit areas to stabilize the situation and protect lives. When deployed, the Guard helps secure key areas and public buildings, making sure critical infrastructure stays safe and functioning. Troops assist with evacuations and rescues, guiding people out of danger zones and helping those who are trapped or stranded. They also provide logistics and medical aid, delivering supplies, setting up emergency support hubs, and treating the injured on the ground. Legal challenges and reactions. Legal battles in multiple jurisdictions delayed or outright blocked planned National Guard deployments in several U.S. cities, turning what the administration framed as swift security measures into protracted constitutional and political fights over federal authority and local control. In Chicago and Portland, troops who had been sent in anticipation of potential unrest were never actually deployed onto the streets, because court injunctions stepped in and legally froze the federal plans before guard units could take up visible positions in those neighborhoods. A federal judge in Oregon and in the Chicago case, the U.S. Supreme Court both intervened to prevent full deployments, issuing rulings that significantly limited how far the administration could go in using military forces in civilian spaces without stronger legal justification. In Los Angeles, however, National Guard troops were used this year as part of a broader crackdown that combined crime control with tougher immigration enforcement, blending public safety messaging with efforts to target undocumented migrants and cross-border networks. Washington, D.C. also faced major obstacles, with city authorities and legal challenges ultimately halting the deployment of more than 2,000 guardsmen, underscoring the tense push and pull between local leaders and the federal government over who controls security on the Capitol streets. Trump sharply criticized Democrats in response, calling them greatly incompetent for questioning or resisting federal intervention, and accusing them of putting ideology and partisan politics ahead of public safety and the protection of ordinary citizens. Democrats, in turn, accused the Trump administration of exaggerating isolated incidents of violence and disorder to justify deployment, arguing that the White House was inflating threats and using the National Guard as a political tool rather than a last-resort security measure.